Hello everybody and welcome to another top 5 board gaming video. Today's topic is all about interactive games and more specifically highly interactive games. So one can make an argument very well that any board game is going to be interactive, unless you're playing solo. The fact is that you're always going to be interacting with your opponent or your cohorts in some way, shape, or form, but for these games specifically, the way that I am defining them in my narrow range, or relatively narrow, is that it's always going to be you have to talk with the other people, you have to negotiate with them, you have to figure out how to work together or how to work apart or whatever it happens to be, and there is always something going on, there is always going to be discussion, and there is always going to be figuring out what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. But still, this is a very broad category, even with such a definition and a relatively high bar to reach. And so, of course, I want to know what you guys think about this. What do you think about interactivity in games in general? Do you like games that are less interactive and more like I'm kind of doing my own thing and don't bother me? Or do you like games that are more interactive and you have to rely on your cohorts or you have to rely on your competitors to get what you need? Let me know anything in the comments below. You know I love to hear it all, but that said, we're going to jump right in with my number 5. At number 5, I've got The Resistance. Now, this particular game could very easily be replaced by a lot of other indie card and board games like Resistance Avalon or Coup or any number of these other things. Same thing with like Secret Hitler, all of these kind of secret identity games, because the whole point is that you are constantly going back and forth trying to figure out who's who, what's what team are you on, all of this kind of thing. It's a great interactive game. It's a ton of fun, and the fact is that the stakes are not super high. It's an easy game to play. It's a great party game. It's a fun family game that you can play with a bunch of people, and it works really well. But the thing is, it's so low on the list for me particularly simply because it's relatively light just in terms of the game itself. In terms of the interaction, it's very heavy. You have to discuss things with your fellow players. You have to discuss what's going on, who's going, who's not going, who do you trust, who do you not trust, all of that kind of stuff. Still a great game. It is still one of my absolute favorites. The Resistance, my number 5. At number 4, I've got the Big Daddy Twilight Imperium, in this case the 4th edition. Now you might be kind of surprised that this is relatively low on the list, but the fact is that this game has so much going on that yes, a lot of it is based off of interaction. You've got trade, you've got politics, you've got combat, you've got all sorts of different deal making and wheeling and all of this sort of thing. But the fact is that a lot of the deals you make are not set in stone and nobody can do anything about it and all of this sort of thing. But the fact is that also that you do have trade negotiations, you do have political negotiations, you can trade for clout and all of this kind of thing, and you can make alliances, you can break alliances, and you actually have things that say we are allied and all of this kind of thing. So it is a great game in that sense, but the fact is this is a massive space opera game. It's huge, it takes forever to play, it's virtually impossible to get to the table, but once it's on the table, then it's essentially nothing but interaction in terms of I'll give you this if you give me this. You've got tons of all of that type of stuff, and that's why it's still one of my favorite games to this day. But as far as heavy interaction, lower on the list simply because it's got so much else going on. Twilight Imperium, my number 4 for 4th edition. That worked out well. At number 3, I've got Game of Thrones, a board game. Very similarly to Twilight Imperium, this is a game that is all about negotiation, backstabbing, and combat, and resources, and trade, and all of this kind of stuff. But it is much more in-depth in terms of exactly how you are interacting with your fellow players. Now, the reason for that is because of the way that the tokens work, where you have your attack tokens, your defense tokens, and most importantly, your support tokens. The support tokens are really what are the crux when it comes to the interaction and kind of squeezing one side or the other and essentially saying, well, if I help you out, what are you going to give me? If I help you out, what are you going to give me? And so this is a lighter game compared to Twilight Imperium, so you can really see the table interaction and all of that kind of stuff coming together a lot more. In addition, throughout the game you have the attacks of the wildlings where everybody has to come together in order to fight off a singular threat. And so you've got kind of both sides of the interaction of, yes, we're fighting, but I know I need help. And you also have, yes, we're fighting, but we have a common enemy as well. And so you've got trade, you've got this, you've got the throne, you've got the sword, you've got all of this sort of stuff. You've got, let's team up, let's do this, let's do that, let's betray. It's a wonderful game. Highly recommend. I absolutely adore this game. They actually have a really good version of it on Steam if you can't get anybody to play with, so definitely recommend that. And if you have the hard copy of it, do get the expansion with the Targaryen house, because how can you have Game of Thrones without Targaryens? But regardless, Game of Thrones, my number 3. At number 2, I've got Chinatown. This is a little bit of a curveball, but the fact is that this is some of the most interaction that I've ever seen in any board game. But the fact is that it feels like Monopoly. And that's kind of the point. The idea of this game is that you have a hand of cards that represent specific tiles representing businesses. And the more tiles of the same type of business that you get next to each other, the stronger it is and the better it is for you personally. The fact is, though, that you only have so many to start with, and unless you get really lucky and get all of the things that you need to build a massive empire of whatever the business is, you have to trade with your opponents. And that's really the crux of the game. You have to talk to them, you have to negotiate, you have to make sure that you give them something that they want in order so that you can get something that you want in return. And I absolutely adore that aspect. It's somewhat similar to things like Bonanza, where you do have that idea of, I know that you need this, so can you take it? But in Bonanza, it's a lot more time critical, as opposed to in Chinatown, where it's much more strategic in terms of when and how you can place things. And so that's why I put it on this list as opposed to something like Bonanza, not to mention putting it so high, because it truly is a highly interactive game, because that's what it's all about. It's all about negotiation, figuring out what it is that your other players want, what it is that you want, and how you can get what you want while giving them a little bit of what they want, but maybe not necessarily all that they want. Great game, lots of fun, unfortunately very, very difficult to get. Chinatown, my number 2. At number 1, I've got Captain Sonar. You can't get more interactive than everybody at a table yelling at each other all the way around and all across the board. This is an absolutely incredible game, especially with the right group of people. It is a real-time chaotic game where you've got 2 submarines trying to track one another down and blow each other up. The thing is that you've got different roles on each submarine, and everybody can kind of hear what's going on, and everybody has their specific role to play in terms of where you're going, how you're going, and what you're doing, and all of this kind of thing. It's an incredible game. I absolutely adore it. And when it comes to interaction, not only do you have to interact with your own team and make sure that they are hearing what you say if you're the captain, or you're hearing your captain, but if you're the radio operator, you have to hear what the other captain is saying so that you can try and track them down and figure out where they are so that you can attempt to blow them up. It's just an amazing experience. It's a lot of fun. That said, you do need the right type of people to play this, because again, it is kind of chaotic. That said, there are variants that allow you to do kind of a turn-by-turn thing to make things a little bit easier. And there's also a kind of a variant of the game called Sonar, which not only uses fewer people, but it's designed to be less chaotic. So either way, still very interactive, still a ton of fun. Captain Sonar, my number one. Well, everybody, that's it for me. I hope that you enjoyed this video on my top 5 favorite games that are highly interactive. Again, I define this as something where you are constantly discussing things with people across the table, and the reason for that is because it's something that I normally don't do very well. I'm not good at talking to people, but if I'm playing a board game, I'm having a ton of fun with it, and it means that I can negotiate to try to get a particular planet or a particular good or a particular building or whatever it is. And it's in the game, it's in the mode, I am in my element, and it feels so much better, and it makes me feel great, frankly. But that said, there's a lot of different ways that you can define highly interactive. You can take any cooperative game and say that those are highly interactive because you're always trying to figure out a strategy in order to figure out how are we going to beat the game. Do those count? Who knows? Captain Sonar is a bit of a cooperative game because you've got team versus team and all of that kind of stuff. So as always, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below, whether to the extent of what is high interactivity or what do you think of the games that I picked, all of that good stuff. You know I love to hear it all. But that said, if you haven't done so already, as always, please take a look at my various social media pages where you can interact with myself and my channel in a whole bunch of different ways. And of course, COVID is still spreading. Stay safe, keep your family safe. That's all I'm going to say about it. Just be careful, please. But with that, thank you so very much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.